Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, welcome to another Attican Plays Railway Empire video. This is Attican, and we're going to do the Metropolis 1830 scenario by request. I've been asked to do this one. I'm assuming folks are having a little trouble with it, so I thought I'd give it a shot and give you maybe help folks out with this one. This is all about New York City. This is kind of a one city cluster deal. So we're going to have a lot of specialty cities in this one. Every other city is going to be there for the sole purpose of making New York grow. So if you look at our task list, it's all about growing New York very quickly and then growing New York to be very large toward the end. And in the middle, the two tasks that stand out are creating clothing and shipping 100 boxcars of clothing to New York and shipping 100 boxcars of alcohol to New York. So we have, they give us a nice start because there's an open slot in Baltimore for an industry. So we've got enough funds, we can throw down a meat industry in Baltimore and take advantage of that cattle ranch down there nearby, and this one right here, and run that cattle up to Baltimore and then run that meat over to New York, and that'll take care of one of our key components of city growth, meat. And I decided to attack this as kind of a basic look at what are the basic things that you need to grow: meat, beer, logs, wheat, and corn. And to the best of our ability, we're going to supply those things kind of sort of in that order and make sure that we're getting those, and then add all the other things we can as we come to them, and try to just make a good solid foundation for New York to grow upon. And we'll keep going from there and keep adding stuff in, of course, as we go. So I'm going to try to, instead of just yammering away like I usually do, as you know, I'm recovering from a little flu, a little bout of the flu, and don't want to try to talk too much because I've literally had to do annotations in the last few videos because I literally can't talk. But I seem to be doing okay right now, and we'll see if I can hang in there and do this one. So again, I'm going to try to, and you can see I'm already I'm spending 3 minutes telling you I'm not going to talk very much. That's kind of typical me. So I'm going to try to just highlight the key points and maybe not yammer away quite so much. So we built our meat industry in Baltimore. We've started feeding it cattle, so it should get a good supply of cattle, and it's something we can control and add to. And now it doesn't do us any good as far as New York's concerned until we can ship the goods to New York. So now we're setting up the line between Baltimore and New York, which will feed cattle and eventually clothing to New York, because there is a clothing industry in Baltimore. We left that alone because of course, clothing's a key element here, and we'll be using that later on. Right now, it's kind of worthless because there's no textiles being fed into it, but we'll address that later on. So right now, we're worried about meat. We want to get meat headed to New York as quickly as we can. And we need a revenue too, so it'd be nice to just have those trains running and making us some money. But the main thing is we need to get meat going to New York. All right, now, even though we're just running these little grasshoppers, these slow 1830 trains, I'm only going to start with 4 on this line because I know that I'm going to be using that line. I'm going to be adding some other things into that line as shortcut, quick ways to get some more raw materials into New York. And I don't want it to get too crowded with too many trains right off the bat. And we just need enough to start getting that meat headed over. You can see there's a whole bunch of mail heading over right now. So we'll be able to make money on those 4 trains as they're working. And then hopefully, quickly, we should see meat start heading over to New York. Now, that's the meat. Now let's think about the beer. The closest beer is in Albany. Now, Albany is not in a great position to get wheat, though. So we're going to come up with a way to handle that. As you'll see here in a moment. Right now, we're just establishing a line, Albany to New York, which again will be a nice little profitable line for us, running some passengers and mail, and then eventually some beer. That's our real target, is to get beer headed to New York. And you can see right there, New York is actually losing population right now. But we're not going to panic. We're just going to methodically go through this and build up the elements we know, the things that we know will help New York grow. So again, we did meat first. Now we're working on beer. And money is tight up front because we did build that industry. We spent, I think it's $350,000 on the meat industry, but well, a very, very good investment because we've got to get that meat flowing. And there you see some beer being picked up. You always get that little honeymoon period when these things start, where each of these industries seem to have a nice little supply of stuff ready to go. You're not sure where it's coming from because there's no wheat nearby, but they always have that little bit to get you going. So that's nice because you can make profit off that when you first start running it. Use that profit to then go out and do whatever you need to do to bring the raw material in. Decided to go ahead and grab the logs right away because New York has 2 wood-based industries right now. They have a sawmill and a furniture store, furniture industry, and we might as well get paid for bringing those logs in. I know that the logs will creep in over land, but we might as well be making the money on them. We're going to start out with 1 train, and that will change dramatically over the course of play. as those wood-based industries get bigger and bigger, and we start planning in there ourselves. Didn't really have a great research strategy for this one, I have to admit. I just sort of grabbed whatever looked good that was up there and available. At one point, I do go to the John Bull, but you know that's kind of classic what you would do on the 1830s maps. But there you see New York has grown. I think it's hit the 60,000. We'll check it here in a minute. Now, here's what we're going to do to address our wheat problem right off the bat. We're going to do a little branch line coming off of that Albany, New York line. And we're going to run it up to the wheat. And that way we'll be able to haul wheat directly to Albany, which will feed the beer industry. And then that beer can come back on the Albany, New York line and feed into New York. And there we go. We see we can get a museum in New York, which we absolutely want to do. So we're just going to wait right now and make sure we can get that museum in New York as soon as possible, because that'll help us the entire time. That's 10% relief on your demand satisfaction. That is huge when you're trying to grow a city. All right, so now New York has a museum. That's going to help us the rest of the game.
You should look for your train.
Now we're going to finish our crossover, get our switches in there so that train running the wheat will be able to run on the correct side of the road. And I actually think I messed this up at some point. Somehow I messed this up, if I'm not mistaken. We'll see. That looked fine right there, but maybe it's later. Maybe it's later I goof it up. That looked good right there, actually. Starting to get the bag condition breakdowns, which means it's time to start thinking about repairs. I just can't stand to watch these railroads run where the trains break down all the time. And you can see New York's growing. You see the little green dot down there next to it. So New York is growing for us. And here we go. Now we've got some wheat going to Albany. That will feed the beer industry in Albany and allow the beer industry to ship its output down to New York. So hooray for us. So now we've established beer, we've established meat, and we've got logs coming in. And really, wheat and corn would be the only other ones. New York does get some wheat overland because it's pretty close to that wheat farm up there. So that's a good thing for now. But corn is way up there in the mountains, so it's not going to get any corn. And it's a little too far for us to address right this minute because money's a little too tight. Now, the good thing in this scenario is you do make money. You can absolutely make money on these. If you have these industries and you're running trains between these cities, and you got these cities that are growing like New York, and other cities around it will grow as well, just almost by osmosis. We don't have to focus on them, but they'll grow just naturally. Now we're not getting enough meat, so I want to bump up the meat production. We're not getting a meat timely enough into New York. And I would love to own that sucker, that brewery, but I don't have the money right now to bid on it. But we've got New York growing, so we're looking pretty good there. It's right on the cusp, and that's kind of the theme for the whole playthrough, is on the cusp, right at that 60 mark. So we're just going to throw some things in there to push it over the edge and throw some veggies into New York. And while we're at it, let's grab some milk and throw that in there.
A station in the middle of nowhere? This is a non-starter.
Forgot to finish my crossover, no wonder it wouldn't work. So finish the merge, check your signals, make sure everything's working correctly, and then you should have a line that'll work. That's better. Okay, so we've added veggies and milk. We've got meat and beer and logs. So we're doing pretty well.
Fortunately, one of your trains didn't make it.
And if we can get a surveyor, we'll absolutely take one, get discount on our track. That's the best surveyors, the guy that gives you that 5% discount on your routes. Okay, you can see we're growing. We're close to hitting that 80,000 already, so looking good. Now I want to hook up Washington for a couple reasons. It's going to come into play later on, and also because it's just income for our meat industry. So we can keep pushing the meat industry, making sure it's shipping to New York, which will always be a challenge here. but we've got some easy revenue here. We can ship meat down to Washington, make money there, and we've got that cheese, that dairy factory or dairy business down there that will help us later on, and can start feeding Baltimore as soon as it's big enough. It may even be big enough now, I'm not sure. But at any rate, we can run a profitable line here, even if we just run mail and passengers between the two cities. So we'll just run a couple of trains between Washington and Baltimore, and they'll do just fine for us.
This technology is mine now.
And see, beer and meat, we're not getting them fast enough. It's just a challenge the whole time to try to get them fast enough. The beer industry's got enough going on. He's getting wheat now, and that's good. New York isn't getting enough wheat. We'd like for them to get more. And look, we can go out here. Here's some close by fruit. We might as well grab that and run that into the city as well. Okay, now we've got fruit going into New York. And we've got a little traffic jam here. What's going on? And it's because I haven't set the interim signals, I believe. Is that the problem?
Dear. There seems to be a little problem with one of your locomotives.
Ah, there's the problem. We've got that wheat coming in on the wrong side. See how it's coming in on the left? So there's a goof up on the line here, and that needs to be fixed because that's going to cause problems. But there, now we've hit our first objective. We've got our 80,000 growth in New York, and it's still growing. So we're doing a good job in spite of our rather bad track layout here. We've got one little goof up here in the way these trains are coming down. See, there's another one going up on the left side. We don't want that. We want it to cross over. So we've got to figure out what caused that line that used to work to not work anymore. And I think it's as simple as putting that on there. So see, yep, that was it. Now the trains weren't going over on the right where it belongs. So we'll just wait for this one to go on up. It's holding up everybody, but once that one train gets up there to Albany, turns around, comes back the right way, then everything will be working. So I think the lesson there for all of us is when you're doing these somewhat complex little merges like this, check your signals and make sure that those direction lines are going the way you expect them to go everywhere. Not most of the places, but everywhere. You want everything going either, east-west, west-east, whatever it is you need it to do, you need to explicitly make sure it's doing the right thing. So now we're going to bring Syracuse into the mix, and we're starting to look ahead now. We're really looking ahead now to textiles and clothing, because you've got that nice cotton farm right up there, right near Syracuse. And we're getting some growth. Syracuse, by the way, on this map for what is really in a wonderful position to grow. If you look, it's got lots of resources near it that come in overland. So Syracuse will grow even if you don't touch it. And Albany's actually growing a little bit as well because we're sending it the wheat, which is helping it. And it's got the beer, and it's getting stuff from New York a little bit, and it's got fruit nearby. It's got corn fairly close by, so Albany can grow a little bit. Syracuse is a wonderful place to grow, And we're going to take advantage of that big time with both those cities.
One of your trains isn't doing what it should be doing.
All right, so it's time to take advantage. Now, what we want to do here, and we're going to go grab some money. We're on the cusp of it. There we go. We're going to grab some money, like I said, and we're going to put a tailor in Albany. And on the assumption that we can then put a textile mill in Syracuse when it grows and hits that 40,000 mark. Because that we want the textiles in Syracuse because it's close to the cotton, first of all, and really more to the point for us, because we already have an Albany to New York line, we won't be able to ship our clothing from Albany to New York. So we definitely want to have that tailor in Syracuse and clothing in Albany, and that way it's a nice thing for us because it allows us to ship the clothing, like I said, and it allows us to take advantage of that cotton plantation right up there near Syracuse. And I don't know about you, but I don't think the Syracuse area grows a lot of cotton. I don't think that would be an accurate, realistic placement for cotton, but we're glad it's there. Got a placement bonus, we might as well take it and help our cities grow. And we're starting to get a little bit of money. This is nice. We're starting to have enough money to be able to do what we want to without doing a whole lot of waiting. So our economy is pretty strong right now for an early game economy. Looking pretty good. Still having a hard time keeping enough meat in there. We are getting meat, but we're not keeping enough to really keep them happy. So we'll expand that meat business and try to get more headed that way. And also, if we're going to expand the business, feed it more cattle.
Express trains are especially fast, popular with affluent travelers. And since there are more and more of them, it is good that you operate so many of these trains.
Okay, we've got an easy one to deploy the number of trains. That was not a problem. And the express trains, you're going to get that early if you run decent lines. That was hardly a challenge to get that 5 or 6 express trains going. You almost can't help that. Now we got danger of our express lines running out, but that's okay. Now here we go. Now we can put a weaving industry in Syracuse. Take advantage of that cotton up there. And we might as well get paid for shipping it down and make sure we have a good steady flow. That textile industry can now use the line from Syracuse to Albany to feed Albany's clothing industry with textiles. And then that clothing, of course, can be shipped to New York. So we've got clothing coming in at least from Albany at this point, and we're going to see about making that a little better.
I simply love Doc McCasey's extra creamy cream confections.
You should look for your train.
Come on, budge your station over a bit. There's enough space here for the two of us.
One enhancement I'd like to see, do you know how she just said budge your station over a little bit? When they say stuff like that, like Don Lorenzo will say, I just set up an industry now, you supply it with raw materials. It'd be nice to be able to click on the icon and move to where he's talking about so that you can see what they're talking about. So she just put a station in next to me, and to find that out, I'm going to have to scroll around all my cities to see where that happened if I'm really concerned about it. I can think now from memory that it would have been either Washington or Baltimore. I think it's Washington. No, it couldn't have been Baltimore. We have to. I think it's in Washington. Yeah, there it is. She put one in Washington. Now we're going to start our textiles from the other direction. We're going to build a textile industry in Washington, which can feed the clothing industry in Baltimore. Now we're going to have to go down here to the south, which is a more reasonable place to find a cotton plantation, and haul cotton a long way up to Washington. So it's going to cost us some money to set this up. We're going to have to jump over opponents' tracks and navigate several rivers as we work our way up through here. But just the same, it's worth it. We want to start taking advantage of that clothing industry in Baltimore to have clothing going into New York from a couple of different places.
This isn't a locomotive, it's a scrap heap on wheels.
Oh dear, there seems to be a little problem with one of your locomotives.
Okay, there we're finally starting to see some textiles coming from Syracuse to Albany, so Albany can start creating clothing. So that's a good thing. You can see New York's still growing. Ah, there it dropped off. It just keeps on that cusp, like I said, the whole time. But we should start shipping clothing quickly. And we've got to get this line going down here, this big expensive line, to get cotton up to Washington. So I'm going to start one train of cotton going just to get things going before I double track. And then we'll have to be careful how we double track, make sure we don't mess it up and get it going the wrong way. Should have no problems. So Station Master can help us with 5% faster turnaround in the stations. That's always great. That's really critical, really, in this game, the turnaround in the stations. Especially in New York, it's going to be busier and busier as we go along. And there you can see that train's on the left-hand track, so we're going to have to let it run all the way up before we start setting up any restrictions on where it can go. Now we could run them on the left side, obviously, but that's I'm not smart enough to deal with that. Although I think that's what I just did. All right, so we've got a little delay here. What's going on? Ah, I remember this one. We'll find out that one train, you can see, you're saying, why isn't that little train right there going anywhere? And he's stuck. And he can't quite, I thought it might be signals that way, but he actually wants to go up to that corn farm and can't go. But the reason he can't go is really because we didn't have a signal up there for him to move on up into the track. So he's looking at that whole piece of track from the that's coming out from the station all the way down to that other train there. Now we put that signal in, and that'll allow him to go on up and get up out of the way. There he goes. Now he's running up there and getting out of the way. So that solves that little problem. Now we're starting to see some clothing being shipped slowly. Not nearly fast enough, but we are seeing it. And we're still not getting textiles fast enough. So why aren't we?
Unfortunately, one of your trains didn't make it.
Okay, we're expanding this, but we're also not getting cotton fast enough, so we're going to have to expand that cotton line as well and run more trains to get that cotton down there faster. So I just made a copy of another cotton line, which is a cotton train, which is fine. Doesn't hurt a thing, but it wasn't what I was trying to do. And because it was cotton, I don't think I realized the mistake right off the bat. I actually had the Washington cotton line pulled up and ended up duplicating it. So hopefully, we will come back and fix that. But it's kind of funny, we're making the wrong cotton line expand. I'd like to have some more money. Spent a lot of time in this particular one on this screen right here, looking for funds. Okay, now we're starting to see some textiles. This is good.
You really should pay more attention to the maintenance of your locomotives. Excuse me, but could you keep out of this? You're driving the price up.
Now that distillery in New York has got to go. There's fruit nearby, but there's just no there's sugar is a long way off, and we don't get credit for creating alcohol in New York. We have to ship alcohol to New York. So what I want there is a log-based industry because I know I can keep it satisfied. So we're going to spend the big bucks and buy that distillery out eventually and replace it with a paper mill. Sorry, spoiler alert. Replace it with a paper mill so that we have 3 wood-based businesses in New York, and we know we can keep them satisfied. And we'll keep pumping them up, the ones we own, and that way we can help New York grow and keep satisfied. And anytime we can throw a museum in like that, we're going to go for it, because it's helpful for all these other cities to grow. As these cities grow, it gives you more options for upgrades. It gives you potentially new businesses you can create and all that stuff. So city growth, well, even though we're not focusing on city growth on these other cities, it's not a bad thing that it happens. So that distillery is bugging me right now. It has got to go. And it's going to be expensive to get rid of it, but it's got to go. Now my tailor's starting to get a good supply of cloth, and we've shipped 15 clothing, so we're starting to do a little better. So right now I'm starting to think ahead. I feel like we've got the clothing under control. We've got it coming from both Baltimore and from Albany. We've got the cloth coming from to feed the tailor shop from both Washington to Baltimore and Syracuse to Albany. So it's time to think about, we need to get a handle on this alcohol before it's too late. We need to get started on it early because it's going to be hard to build 2 of these somewhere. So what we want to do, what we're actually looking at is where can we find sugar and fruit close by, and they're down here to the west of Pittsburgh, out toward Toledo. There are both sugar and fruit. So we're looking at what can we do to start shipping alcohol into New York. And we decided the way we need to go about it is to buy out this meat industry in Pittsburgh. It's not too expensive because it's not really doing a lot of business. So that's a good thing for us. But now we need some more money to do what we want to do. We're looking up a distillery to get the price for it, because we know we've got to do a demolish and a build, and we've got to have our lines running. So we're going to go ahead out here and pick up the sugar and the fruit and start running it in and making money on it, shipping it into Pittsburgh for just normal use, and that way it'll be ready when we're ready to fire up our distillery.
What? Another station? That's not a nice sight.
So we're going to run a double line for the sugar and then use that line, hook the fruit line into that and run them both into Pittsburgh. We're also looking to see what else is out there. You see big city growth in New York, big quarterly profit, not worried about that. We're making lots of money. We're going to continue to make money as we continue to grow these cities. So I'm not worried about the quarterly profit on this one.
Come on, budge your station over a bit. There's enough space here for the two of us. Oh no, it looks like one of your trains has a problem. You might not have realized, but I have already connected this business to my network.
Okay, now we've got fruit and we've got sugar coming into Pittsburgh. Now all we need is a distillery to take advantage of it.
One of your trains isn't doing what it should be doing.
course, to do that, we need more money. So there goes our meat industry, and here comes our distillery. So we'll be able to manufacture alcohol in Pittsburgh. We've got the fruit and the sugar coming in. Now we just need to figure out how to ship it to New York. And we're just going to do a big long line straight to New York. Or well, straight to a hookup that'll allow us to get to New York. And here we got to get do a little jumping over top of our competitor. So I was looking into coming down here and hooking up with the main line, Baltimore, New York main line. There's just too much going on down there. There's too many, you got to jump over too many things. It's just not what we want to do. So we're going to go over here and hook up with this, the wheat line that's coming down. And if you recall, that one's actually bypassing New York and heading to Albany, but you can see what I'm sure you can guess what we'll do to take care of that. So first I'm thinking hook into that main line, but then I realized, no, we've got this station I put in. I haven't even started using it yet, so I want to go into that line. But it's very clumsy to get into that line. Then I realized I can just hook up with that existing line right there pretty easily. Do my merge, get my little crossover going. Check those signals, make sure they're working. There we go. Almost. I realize that's not going to be going in that direction. Now what we have to do over here is now just jump off of that line that's going to Albany and just slide on over into New York. Like so. And I wanted to double track it back, but it turned out it really was kind of tight, so I ended up leaving it as because of that switch in there, we can't really double track it, so we'll have to just leave it as an extension like that. So that piece will get thrown away. After I stubbornly try a little bit more. So now we got to go back and finish off our big long line. We got to finish off that merge there. Make sure those signals are still correct. And then finish off our line all the way back to Pittsburgh. And there we have a nice, beautiful line that runs all the way from Pittsburgh to New York. And will allow us to take, actually, textiles, which we haven't been shipping, which is a good thing. We'll be able to ship textiles to New York from Pittsburgh, and we'll be able to ship alcohol. And this one I did a little differently. This one I decided we're going to prioritize alcohol, but you're going to run full. That's a long run, and there's no reason to run part of a train up through there. So we're going to run full. It's very unusual for me to set up a city to city like this, but it seemed like the right thing to do. So we're going to, and of course it takes off with leather, first off. Our distillery hadn't really gotten running yet. We've got a lot of leather built up there that's left over from when we had that meat factory. So it's pumping that out. Now we're seeing some textiles. Our distillery, there we go. Our distillery should be up and running now. We're going to expand it a couple of times. Get it rocking and rolling. And there we go. We see our first alcohol along with some more textiles and a couple of folks who want to go up to New York. So we're going to run like 8 trains from Pittsburgh to New York. It's a long haul, and we've got to haul a lot of alcohol. So,
I sent the spy over to you. Surely you don't.
and now we're starting. This is 1833, so we're getting an early start on alcohol. So the plan is that this one line from Pittsburgh to New York will suffice in terms of getting us to our alcohol requirement. And you can see right there, that's where it paid off to make it wait, because it waited and got a couple of extra alcohols loaded up. Now here's one. It's going to have to wait a while until it gets enough. It could even lose some passengers because they won't wait around forever. But we're not worried about money. I'm not worried about passengers. I'm worried about stuff. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.